My name is Scott Challoner, and you are listening to the Leaders Council podcast for the people who run the country and the people who keep the country running. You join us on a very grey spring morning here in the capital, and I'm delighted to say that joining me once more on this programme is Farouk Deen. Welcome back to the show, Farouk. Fantastic to have you.
Thank you for inviting me back and then hosting me again. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And to the listeners who might not remember Farouk is the creative director at event management group Cellar Door Promotions, but he's also a co-founder of network-driven incubator for creative and environmental, social and corporate governance aligned founders called Nexus. And Nexus has been approved by the Home Office as an endorsing body for the purpose of startup and innovator visas. And that's going to be really what we're focusing on today. First and foremost, Farouk, when we sort of talk about ESG, environmental, social and corporate governance, I suppose our thoughts are instantly drawn towards, sustainability, green policies, net zero, etc. But in a practical sense, what does this actually mean in Nexus's case? What sort of work have you been doing on that front?
There's several perspectives that we take when it comes to ESG as an umbrella term. I suppose the global objective of our application of ESG is authenticity. You may be familiar with terms of like greenwashing, for example, where you have corporates that have professed to move towards more green based objectives or ways of production or doing their business, when actually, when you take a closer look, it's not actually aligned with what they're saying. So first and foremost, our practical application when we talk to our members, other corporates, under the guise of ESG, is what is it that you're stating as part of your principles within those three spheres, and do your actions marry up? So that's the first practical application of how we approach ESG, the authenticity of it, and an alignment of actions and words. And then specifically in terms of practical applications, we obviously embody the principles as best as we can ourselves, and it's a continual improvement. And by that I mean ESG principles is not a destination. It's actually something that's an ongoing principle of how you go about doing your business, that you can continuously evolve given where you are in your business cycle, your capacity to facilitate what you'd ideally like to do underneath those ESG segment areas, and then ultimately ensuring that what you are having as a plan, because it may be that you don't even have a plan in place under those three areas, but having a plan that's been created and then stepping in and putting in goals towards achieving those. So those are the practical applications of ESG that we look at Nexus.
Yeah, fantastic. And how is Nexus sort of helping harness that entrepreneurial spirit in the UK by sort of helping startups? Of course, you're helping with sort of the practical implementation of ESG, but there are other things that you're doing as well, aren't there?
Yeah. So we operate a co-working spaces, a global network of infrastructure designed specifically to support the creative, digital and tech industries. That's what you would say our main product is, outside of anything more niche like ESG. However, woven into that, particularly with what we give in support to startups in particular, or entrepreneurs, or even at early stage, idea stage startups, is actually a program, an incubator, which takes place online for 8 weeks. It's called Nexus ESG Startup Program, specifically designed to give the tools and direction, not only in how you can take your startup idea or pre-seed startup to the next level, but also then start thinking about the ESG principles as soon as possible in terms of starting to have the plan. And we've had some great masterclass providers involved, everyone from Alan Greenberg, John Newbegin, to Henry Ludlam. We have had some really good course providers. We've had Ezeki Britton as well from Back Practical, Paris Petgrave, has done a few masterclasses through all our cohorts. And these are professionals that have been there and done that. They've started their own businesses. They're also angel investors in their own right. They're pioneers, they're innovators. And what that really is, again, gives, you use the word in terms of practical, we really give access to the cohort members of our program, access to lived experience. So what you're being advised, the guidance you're being given has been pressure tested in the public arena, in situations whereby they know in terms of the common journey of building and running your business, you're more likely or most likely to come across these certain challenges or views and perceptions. So that's really what's key for us in terms of what we do. And in addition to that, we are, as you had mentioned during your introduction, a collaborative incubator. So it's peer-to-peer support as well. We have a global network of founders, entrepreneurs, and freelancers that work specifically in the creative, digital, and tech industries that are accessible via our online channel, our Slack. We have regular events that we host as well. And we very much facilitate and encourage peer-to-peer support and just asking questions. That's the reason why we initially created Nexus, was to provide that space for inquiries and curiosity to be met. And that's really a principle that we intend to facilitate even further into the future. So we're very much about leveraging the global network skills and contacts. We encourage our actual members to utilize the business support that we provide as a service, such as our HR, legal, accountancy, corporate finance, and investment funding services that form part of what you'll get access to as your membership. And then at the base level, as I said earlier, you've got access to our infrastructure, the office spaces, the meeting rooms, the storage, the photo studios, the recording studios, all the facilities that you may require or need if you are a business in the creative, digital, and tech industries. You have a one-stop shop in Nexus to work, grow, and sustainably build your businesses.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic, isn't it? And I think when we talk about sort of the value of networking, especially in that sense, I think we've kind of almost been reminded of that over the last couple of years through the COVID-19 situation, haven't we? When we've seen businesses, we've seen entrepreneurs, often competitors as well, sort of talking to each other and sort of exchanging intellectual material more than ever before, just because there was that recognition that, you know, we're all in a similar boat here. We've all got to kind of work together, harness that entrepreneurial spirit that we have to kind of progress. And is that something that you've sort of seen yourself as well?
Scott, I couldn't agree anymore. The power of networks is paramount. If I hark back to my first interview with you, this was just after the peak of the pandemic coming out back in 2020, and one of the remarks that I said was that one of the principles that we are working within is that you have to be fleet of foot in terms of being able to pivot quite quickly, but also the access to information, good quality information in a timely matter, is also equally as important. And I found that that's best derived from a curated peer group. And that is what Nexus is in terms of a curated peer group, a network. So instantaneously, wherever you are in the globe, you have someone that you are affiliated with. And the power of that cannot be diminished or minimized. It could be anything to do with business, but let's not forget there's also the personal aspect as well. Let's say you are moving to the UK from abroad using one of the business visa groups. You may be looking for, I don't know, accommodation or places to go or eat, or whether there's local community groups in terms of the passion areas that you have, be it cycling or yoga. That's what holistically a network has. You don't necessarily know exactly what you would need from it, but you just realize that, and this is another important aspect, the more you feed into a network, if that network's full of people that are very generous, you will get what you may need back down the line. And that's something that I think has proven very useful for not just myself and the other members of our group, but also our membership as well, is that network effect of power of numbers.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those key lessons I think that we've certainly taken from the pandemic, isn't it? And obviously another key facet of Nexus as well that I think we should cover during the discussion is that it endorses. It's obviously a home office endorsing body for the sort of the purpose of distributing startup and innovator visas, as we touched on at the beginning. And if you do sort of choose to allocate a visa to anybody, I suppose the recipient has to be among the very best and brightest to obviously come and work in the UK's creative and digital industries and really offer something to those sectors. So from your perspective, when you're looking at those potential applicants, what standards do they need to adhere to in order to be successful in that sense?
Yes, standards are high. We only endorse the best and brightest global talent to work in the UK, and it is cutting edge creative tech and digital sectors. We very much are open with regards to the ideas within that are presented to us, where we do have a preferred list of sectors that are of particular interest to what we know ourselves in terms of how we can facilitate, also that what we know and what we desire in the UK in terms of our industry. So tech, digital, I've already mentioned, VR, events, media, film, music, fashion and textiles, gaming, dance, smart screens. These are all sectors that I'm sure you always got are very high interest to the UK in terms of our ability and service and our market and what we're doing. FinTech is also very much, medical tech is very much a part of our remit and interest. And with regards to the main three areas I would like to point towards what we pressure test really, is it a sustainable idea? Is it a viable idea? Is it sustainable? And is it innovative? Those are the three litmus test main areas that we look at in terms of the business idea and plan within those sectors. We do also then filter principles amongst ESG, existing ESG in terms of their environmental, social governance impacts that they may have. But as well as that, we also look at our ability to implement or embed or teach ESG principles to the idea as well. So how teachable are the founders in that regard? And we've endorsed some very experienced entrepreneurs, but they may not necessarily have been experienced in running businesses in the UK. And they may not necessarily have had experience in regards to creating an ESG specific plan for their businesses. So there's always room for learning, and that's also a very key thing that our board take a look at is the feedback that we get off our interviews, potential feedback as well from when they participate as part of our ESG program. And one of the actual requirements is that you undertake our startup ESG program because it allows us to really take an intimate look at how you think, how you communicate, how you network, how you build relationships, how you engage with information. So that's essentially what you will be doing when you come to the UK to run your startup business. There's a lot of information to take in, and there's some common characteristics that you can use as green flags, as it were, to signpost how successful they may be. One of the biggest green flags is how teachable are you? Are you still open? Are you curious? The opposite being also if you arrive with a closed mind, thinking you've been there and done it all, that's usually fertile ground for mistakes.
Yeah, and just speaking of that sort of ESG startup program that you've talked about, I believe the next one, just for those tuning in that might well be interested in that, is starting from August the 2nd, isn't it? It's an 8-week-long online program, I'm right in saying, aren't I?
Yeah, we've actually got one in between that. So we've got a cohort launching on the 23rd of May. It's an 8-week course online. It's a global cohort that we usually have, and we keep the cohort numbers relatively small because we believe that gives a higher level of impact for the course material that you take over the 8 weeks. And at the end of that 8-week program, we have a demo day that we very much look forward to hearing how the businesses have developed through the course program. which is we do invite our network of angel investors, advisors, other masterclass providers as well. We've had a couple from our previous cohorts go on to be actually directly funded from invited VCs and angel investor networks through our program as well. And many of which as well continue to be members of Nexus to this date and engage with new cohorts coming into subsequent programs. So that's been really good to see. So we've seen, like a piece of art, is that we've seen our cohort members of the program use the program in ways that we hadn't at first thought about ourselves. And we've seen them interact with other members in a really positive way that actually wasn't proactively fostered by ourselves, which has been great to see.
Yeah, I suppose that sort of community-centred approach to this, rather than sort of having them all in competition with each other, probably has its merits, doesn't it? I suppose that exchange of ideas sort of helps everybody sort of equally thrive.
Yeah, it does. And as you know as well, when it comes to doing business, there's some projects and opportunities whereby you have to be able to practically work as part of a tender team and collaborate for maybe the bigger pies that are out there to capture and take a slice out of. So as we've seen, even on a geopolitical level, in terms of reaching out for cooperation and making new friends and new relationships, especially in particular post-Brexit, it is a requirement to actually expand one's network and build relationships and maintain those. And having a program that's designed to give founders the practical knowledge in order to do that, obviously in the guise of launching and scaling their creative tech or digital businesses, but having that as a need and requirement as to how you approach that objective, basically future-proofs you, yourself as a founder, future-proofs your businesses, in particular with getting ESG principles involved as well early, future-proofs you for the challenges ahead, and also makes you more attractive for investment opportunities in the future. Because as you're aware, Scott, sustainability issues, governance and environmental impact and positive impact is not going to go away in terms of its importance. It's only going to increase for the future.
Exactly right. There's only going to be more of a need for it, more of a demand for it. Exactly. And obviously what I don't want to do with this next question here is actually sort of give too much away about the ESG startup program, but just for sort of those younger entrepreneurially minded listeners that might be tuning into this, if you sort of personally had to give like a single biggest piece of advice to them to sort of get them on the right track to starting their own business, what single piece of advice would that be, do you think?
That's a very good question. Singular piece of advice to get someone onto the track. Do you know what? If I was to be a more philosophical about the answer, it would be to ignore the small voice that may be talking to you about being an imposter towards what you are planning to do and what you're looking to do for your business. The reality is, everyone, me included, I will speak for myself, but my experience is that everyone is making it up as they go along. And what minimizes mistakes is experience. And you only gain this experience by actually getting up and doing something. So do not talk yourself out of taking that first step because of inexperience. You will only gain that by taking that first step and being open, being honest with yourself and the others around you, forging those relationships and getting connected to networks is the very best chances you can provide yourself for your future success.
Yeah, it's about sort of moving away from the risk averse, isn't it? I think sometimes we can be a little bit guilty of shying away from setbacks and shying away from times where we fail, whereas you need to sort of learn to embrace those opportunities and go into it with more of a win or learn mentality, don't you?
Oh yeah, for sure. Even in looking at areas for my own personal growth, professionally and personally, one of the things that I identified as I've matured in years is my reluctance or is my avoidance of the feeling of incompetence? Because if you think about your journey as a person, girl or boy going to school and then going to university or whatever path you feel may be a job where you're going to learn and build your career, one of the things you're more open to at that cycle of your life is incompetence. You're not expected, and you don't expect yourself necessarily to be fully formed and fully up to speed and know it all off the bat. But as you get further in life, I find people proactively try and avoid that feeling of incompetence, when actually, to an extent, that's exactly what you should be wanting towards, because that's where you will gain the most in terms of your self-development and your knowledge and experience by reading or learning or practically undertaking steps to increase your competence in those areas. So yeah, that's more of a mental mindset, but that does translate into practical application as well, because you might be procrastinating over a document you haven't read because you're not quite fully up to speed on the legalese in that document, or you might be shying away from using a particular new app or SaaS platform that could potentially save you time and energy in the future, but because you're not fully aware of how to use its operating system interface, you haven't quite taken it on board yet. And the same is also true with ideas. Some of the work that we do in Cellar Door as a group is a consultancy work, and some of the challenges that we face is in communicating to the incumbent decision makers to make decisions towards areas that they themselves are not directly on a personal level fully aware of, but their actual business needs are screaming out for, which is the first reason as to why they most likely got in touch with us in the first place, to have an asset, be it of some kind, and they know it's got value, but they don't know how to fully realise that value and in what direction to take it. And that's where you do need experts like myself from the rest of my team to come in and consult. And then you have to trust that, given the fact that we've been there and done it ourselves, that we can implement it. But it's that feeling of incompetence in terms of avoiding that decisions are actually, if you really took time out to take a look, are made to avoid.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously with Nexus's mission to continue to help creative industry startups launch and grow sustainably, I suppose your priority over the next few weeks and months will be continuing to roll out those startup programs. But beyond sort of the startup programs coming up in this year, Farouk, just before we wrap things up, what would you say is the next step for Nexus, and how you're going to be sort of scaling up this idea of really helping these startups sort of excel, thrive, and grow over the coming years?
Yeah, increase of what you've seen so far. So there'll probably be, there definitely will be an expansion of the actual infrastructure Nexus has in place globally. We have got sites that have identified in Italy, in Ghana, in other parts of the UK. We're in talks with a site in Mumbai. So it really will be a fully global infrastructure that you will have access to through Nexus, along with other facilities that I mentioned earlier, like the French Studio and the Corner Studios. Another aspect that you'll see in terms of improvement, in terms of what we have as services, are online masterclasses. You'll have one-off bespoke masterclasses that we've run in the past, increasing, as well as the program itself, continuing with the great talkers that we've had so far as well. And in terms of actual in-person events as well, you'll see a number of bespoke events taking place, or conferences and talks, one of which in the pipeline is our Sustainable Design Festival. That's going to showcase a number of graduate and postgraduate students across some UK universities later on this year as part of London Design Festival. And that will be an event again that I'm looking forward to facilitating with the team and seeing that grow over time.
Yeah, and I look forward to seeing the results of that myself as well, Farouk. Certainly wish you all the best of luck in the world with it.
Down, Scott.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much. You'll get an invite. It'd be great to have you down.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. We'd certainly love to be there, of course, see how it all unfolds. And like I say, I mean, obviously, once we start to see the dust settling on that and we see just how successful it is, I mean, I'd even relish the opportunity to welcome you back onto the show just to talk about what next steps there might be, because it's some absolutely fantastic work that Nexus has been doing. And just for listeners tuning in as well, if you are interested in finding out any more information on what we've discussed today, nexuscreativehq.com, I think, is the port of call, isn't it, Farouk?
That's correct, Scott. Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. Farouk, again, immense pleasure having you join us on the show today, and thank you so much for your time and coming to join us. And by all means, do take care and stay safe with all still going on.
Thank you very much, and likewise.
Yeah, and to all listeners tuning in today as well, I do hope that you thoroughly enjoyed the interview with Farouk Deen. And obviously, to anybody who might be listening in today who might feel that they have their own business, their own organisation with its own tale of success and innovation to share with us, then by all means, we do also want to hear from you. So why not also apply to be on our programme via leaderscouncil.co.uk/apply, because we'd also love to share your story. Until next time, you have been listening to the Leaders Council podcast with your host, Scott Challoner. Do take care and goodbye.